Watauga Arts Council with your host, Cherry Johnson, serving arts in Watauga County for more than 30 years.
Hi, I'm Cherry Johnson, Watauga County Arts Council, and I want to kind of introduce you to a whole new direction. The Arts Council, let me go back and say that we are in the Blue Ridge Art Space. I think you know that. And in that space, we have some meeting space, and many arts groups are discovering that they can come and have their regular meetings there. One of those is High Country Writers. And so through High Country Writers, or through a meeting that they had, I met the lady that's with me today. This is Danielle. Let me see if I can say this. Busoni?
Busoni.
Ah, I got it. And she, well, I told her she has a checkered past. She had originally been a painter back in the day. And you were a full-time professional painter, is that
yes,
correct?
I was a professional artist.
Okay,
right.
and you had studied in various places around the world, I think you said.
And I've shown in Tokyo. I've shown in Europe. I've and of course across the United States. I was a realist, and I am still a realist painter. I studied with a very fine painter in France at École Albert de Foix, and it was an atelier, and we were a group of realist painters. So I got a very good education there.
That's cool. But then you retired the paintbrush, or mostly retired it?
I haven't picked it up again. I'm not saying that I never will, but my life is so busy now.
You've taken a new direction.
It has. I've taken a new direction. I became very ill, and I had a surgical procedure where the doctor cut the wrong thing. And
everybody's nightmare.
That's right, and he nearly killed me, and it took me, for 5 years, I spent most of my time just trying to survive. I had many hospitalizations, many procedures, and many complications, and several of those were life-threatening.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it totally gave you a whole different perspective on life and changed your time that you had to give, too, and energy. Because I'm sure that you did not feel like painting at that point.
No, I couldn't paint. I simply didn't have the strength. 6 years ago, I was so frail, I couldn't make it down a grocery store aisle holding onto a shopping cart. I had to have a 94-year-old friend of mine do my shopping for me because I simply couldn't do it.
That's interesting. That really makes you feel helpless, doesn't it?
I was helpless. I was absolutely helpless.
So then, tell me how this all came about. Now, you were very ill. You finally discovered something that made a big difference in your life.
Well, I had a lot of. I was left with a lot of pain. I had terrible gastric pain from several abdominal surgeries, and there just didn't seem to be any end in sight. And I reached a point where I thought, if this is going to be my life, then I just don't want it. And I had a friend introduce me to a book by T. Colin Campbell called The China Study. And this was about the largest cohort study ever done on nutrition. And the scientists in this study looked at populations that lived very long lives that were virtually disease-free. And what they discovered that these populations had in common were that they lived on a vegetarian diet and with little or no animal protein. And populations that had adopted a Western diet had cancers, autoimmune diseases, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, all of the diseases of modern Western civilization. And so, and another thing that really piqued my curiosity in this book was that Campbell did some research with rats in which he was literally able to turn cancer on and off and on again.
That's fascinating.
It was fascinating. And he did this simply by adjusting the amount of animal protein that he fed them. And so, in addition to my other medical issues, I had also had skin cancer. I'd had a melanoma, which is a life-threatening cancer, and carcinoma. And so I realized that it was time for me to change. And so I immediately went on a plant-based diet. My husband and I got rid of every animal product in our house. And in one day, the gastric pain that I'd been suffering from for years, for months, it simply went away. And within 3 weeks, I was off of blood pressure medication I'd been on for 12 years and was expected to take for life.
Wow.
I no longer had acid reflux. My cholesterol dropped to a healthy low.
All this in 3 weeks?
Yeah, within 3 weeks, and I started losing weight, and so over a period of time, I lost 65 pounds eating anything I wanted, and it was fantastic. I was able to eat foods I couldn't tolerate before, like peppers and onions and garlics and things that used to give me a lot of trouble. I could eat them with impunity now, and so I have become a dedicated vegan. You know, pain was a great motivator for me, and the results were immediate, and so. So I took Cornell's program in plant-based nutrition, and I started cooking and I creating recipes and learning more about plant-based nutrition. And so I've written this book so that I can share it with
Right, and this
with
is
other
the
people.
book. It's called Time for Change, and you can see why she called it Time for Change. And then the rest of it says Whole Foods for Whole Health.
Right.
And in this book, and I've only gotten a copy today, but in this book I've already noticed she tells her story about what happened, and then about how things changed. But then you end with a lot of wonderful recipes. So you really get a cookbook in the deal here, because it gets you started on this kind of a lifestyle.
It's a pretty comprehensive book about transitioning to a plant-based diet.
Gotcha.
It tells my story and how I was able to resolve my issues with a plant-based diet, and also I go into why someone should consider becoming vegan. And I should mention that vegan and plant-based aren't necessarily the same thing.
Oh.
I often tell people I'm vegan just because it's easier, because that, you know, everybody knows what that means, that I don't eat meat. But you can have a very unhealthy vegan diet. You know, Coca-Cola and French fries are technically vegan.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, they're technically vegan, but you won't thrive on that kind of diet. The foods that I'm talking about are foods that are prepared in a way that for one thing, they're whole foods. They have all of their nutrients intact, and they're prepared in a way that preserves their nutrients. And they're absolutely delicious. You know, it isn't about salads and tofu and wheatgrass, you know.
Which is what everybody thinks.
That's right. That's right. It's very delicious food. And you can take most of your recipes that you're accustomed to eating and tweak a few things, change a few ingredients, and you can still enjoy those recipes.
So now you've kind of gone from painting as an art form to not just writing, which I've noticed it seems to be very well written from what part I've seen, but also you're going into the culinary arts and really exploring that as an art form, I think, you know, more than just feeding yourself, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you're also, you and your husband, I understand, check out various vegan restaurants here and there, and you write a blog.
I do. I have a blog. We've got 32,000 followers on Twitter now. Yeah, and we've got about, I think, a little over 1,100 on Facebook. And we review restaurants. We started this blog because we discovered it's difficult to find a place where you can eat when you're a vegan or when you're whole foods plant-based, which is what I consider myself. And so we decided to create a resource so other people can find these places, and that we could draw attention to these deserving places. They need that. And we've also managed to influence other people, some of these restaurants, into offering plant-based options because there's a market for it. Right. You know, veganism has finally become cool.
Oh yeah.
Even Chipotle's is offering plant-based options, and now other fast food places are jumping in on that very profitable plant-based bandwagon, and it's even got a name. It's called the Chipotle effect.
I hadn't heard that one. Okay.
Yeah, and so more people are asking for these foods, so more people are offering them. Right,
right. And so now, what you're doing is you're exploring this whole new section of your life, you know, which really, and you even told me you're taking photographs of your recipes or whatever for your blog.
Yes, I'm learning food photography.
So now she's doing a photography, she's writing, she's, and you're even starting into the publishing field, looking into that. So,
yes, I do have I have started a publishing company. I also do fiction writing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's a whole, you know, what it shows me is that the artist never goes away.
Oh no, you just expand it in different areas.
Ways, exactly. Now let's talk about more specific about this whole lifestyle, because I think people are interested in this. First question I want to ask you is, what happens when you change? What is your body? I mean, you had good effects, but how did it feel?
Well, there are two ways that you can go plant-based. You can do it all at once. I call it the tortoise and the hare. You know, you can do it all at once and go cold turkey, so to speak, which may not be an appropriate term for plant-based, but
seriously, we got to think of a new one for that.
So, which is what I did, and I did it because pain was a big motivator. Now, you can have some side effects to that. Your body can go through a detox process, which could take up to 2 weeks to recover from. It's like having a mild flu.
Well, and it's like I told you, when I went off of caffeine during a pregnancy, there was a definite period there where I did not feel good.
You can feel uncomfortable for a couple of weeks. It's recommended that you eat beans every day because they're so good for you. And
my husband will be glad to hear that one.
Beans are very, very good for
beans.
you. And they help with digestion. They help lower they help with the sugar spikes.
Right.
Beans are fantastic for you, but of course, you know, beans come with gas. But once you get accustomed to eating beans every day, that problem goes away. But you can also do it slowly, even if you're only, you know, you have to do it in a way that is comfortable for you and sustainable for you. Because it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle that will make you well. If you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten: more disease, more pain, more weight gain. You know, and you have to reach a point where you've had enough of that.
And I actually know someone very close to me that has adopted a similar diet or a variation of that, and every now and then this person will, on a special occasion, eat something that normally they would not eat. And they'll usually say, I'm probably going to pay for this, but I'm going to go ahead and eat this right now, you know. And so this is not like, it's not like once you go there, you can never, ever, ever have something, but you just may not choose to.
Well, that's right, because you'll find that your body has its own wisdom. We've just crammed it full of so much junk that you can't get a word in edgewise. And there's a secret that I'll share with you, is that once your body the better you are to your body, the better your body requires that you be to it. Once you get used to not eating animal protein, your body will complain when you try to feed it to it. And also, the more you choose products without animal food, you know, more you choose plant-based or healthy products, the more you're likely to start craving them, and the better you'll feel, and the more likely you're going to want them again and again. You lose your taste for animal protein very quickly.
Interesting.
It took me 3 weeks.
And after, you just had no desire for it.
I not only had no desire for it, it was completely unappetizing. And I think you could put a gun to my head today and I wouldn't eat a piece of meat. I absolutely don't want it, and I know how harmful it is to my body, to all of the cells in my body. Everything improves when you get animal protein out of your system.
That's interesting. Really fascinating. So now you talk about plant-based and vegan, and you said there's some differences?
Well, the difference is that, you know, and I explained before, the difference is that eating whole foods in there, and these don't have to be raw. You can certainly cook. You know, a lot of people think you have to go raw, and you don't, because a lot of foods don't even release their nutrients until they're cooked. Like tomatoes don't release lycopene until they're cooked. And but
all my raw tomatoes aren't helping me on that.
Well, they're good, and they're not going to hurt you. And they still have fiber, and they still have other nutrients. And but the thing is you just want to eat foods that still contain all their original properties. Like you don't want to eat white rice because everything's been stripped from it. You don't want to eat white flour because everything's been stripped from it. So you eat whole grains, you know, whole foods.
Now, you talk about going out to restaurants and that kind of thing, and you said it's getting easier to find this kind of food.
It is, and if you don't, you know, it's better if you learn to cook for yourself, because studies show that people who prepare their own foods at home live longer and healthier than people who don't, regardless of the kinds of foods they cook. Because when you cook for yourself, you know what you're putting into your food, and you automatically make healthier choices. But if you know yourself well enough to know that you don't want to cook, you're never going to go near a kitchen for any reason, then you can at least look for healthier options when you're out. And there are a lot of restaurants that now offer delicious, healthy options. In this area, Hobnobs is a great place to get. That's a great place to get a good vegan meal. Mint is a good place to get a good. They have a huge selection of delicious vegan foods. Thai restaurants are good places. Vietnamese, I don't know if you have that in this area.
I'm not aware of one.
But ethnic foods are fantastic because a lot of these cultures have fasting days in which they're not allowed to eat animal products, so they already know how to make these wonderful foods. You don't have to go in and say, can you make something vegan for me? It's on the menu.
I get you.
South India is largely vegetarian, so Indian restaurants are a sure place where you can get good vegan foods.
Now here's a challenge for you. I work very strange odd hours and long hours, and many times I'm eating at my desk. What options would I have in this besides a salad? Which I do a salad a lot, but besides that, what other options can you think of that I could do that's not a pre-prepared food or something, if I haven't had the time or the luxury of fixing it home and bringing something to warm up? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think if you're not going to prepare it yourself, then obviously you have to get it from somewhere. So I would just go get takeout at one of these great restaurants.
Gotcha. Okay. Do the grocery stores offer anything in that line that's a something you can?
Some do. Earth Fare often has vegan takeout.
Right.
They have a whole bar of things that you can pick and choose from. I don't know really of other places in this area.
Well, and I'm thinking about things like peanuts are a good option.
Oh,
that's a good energy source when you're busy and working, and almonds especially.
Certainly there are trail mixes and things like that you can
that are
get.
nutritious and good for you, and not full of anything else you don't want. I was telling her that I had watched a special recently that really wasn't currently aired. It was an older special on sugar and the amount of sugar that's in our diets, and the sugar that is hidden that we don't see or taste, or we don't realize we taste it, and how that a lot of it's there to entice us, to get us to eat the product.
My brother works My brother works in D.C. and he works with a man who recently lost a huge amount of weight, and he asked him how he lost it, and he said, I gave up sodas. And that's all he did was give up sodas.
Yeah, this special talked about how much sugar was in just one soda, that you would drink, and it was pretty astounding, So, and I think that the major food producers need to work with us on this, and give us better options.
Well, the way to make those changes happen is by voting with your wallet. If you refuse to buy these foods, they'll disappear. And if you demand labeling, proper labeling, if you demand labeling for GMOs will disappear. Genetically modified organisms. In Europe, they're gone.
Well, and even 25 years ago, you never found any restaurants or of any description that would give you the caloric content or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? That information was unavailable. And nowadays, it's not that uncommon to be able to access that kind of information. So our society is making changes in some ways.
Not fast enough,
We are making some changes,
Another thing I wanted to mention is if you're considering adopting a plant-based lifestyle, there are wonderful ways to go about doing that.
Really?
If you don't know how to cook, taking a local cooking class is a good way, because you'll be in a class with people in the same boat as you, and you'll learn to work with new ingredients that you've never experienced before, like quinoa and black rice and chia seeds. I had no idea what those things were or how to use them, and you get to eat your mistakes.
Whether you like them or not.
And you learn new cooking methods. But another way is to join a local vegan meetup group.
That's right. You told me that there was such a thing in Boone now.
There is a fantastic, as a matter of fact, it's the best one I've seen, and it's called Veg Boone, and you can go to vegboone.com and see when they're having a local potluck. It's free. The cost of your meeting is just a potluck dish. You bring something that's...
Would you be intimidated if you don't know what you're doing on this?
Well, if you really can't cook, go to Earth Fair and pick something up. They'll
There you
have
go.
something.
Okay.
But you bring a dish that will feed 6 to 8 people, and it's fantastic because you'll walk in and there'll be a spread of something like 30 dishes, and everybody brings their recipe.
So you know what it is that you're eating.
You know what you're eating. You know whether or not you like it. And now you have the recipe, so you can go home and make it yourself.
That's one of my big frustrations, even at covered dish meals and so forth, is that, it's great, but what is it?
Yeah. Yeah, and there are people who have gluten sensitivities, and you can't use honey, even honey. You can't use honey as a sweetener, no animal products at all. And but it's a fantastic way to meet people who are, like-minded people. They're very supportive. You don't have to be a vegan. You can be just veg curious and come to one of these meetings. It's run by Jeannie and Larry Kaiser, and they're fantastic people and very welcoming. Nobody's pushy. Nobody's going to try to force you to do anything.
Or check to see if you ate something wrong.
Well, you won't be bringing anything wrong to this group, but it's a fantastic group of people, and they're from all walks of life and all ages. A lot of young people there and a lot of older people there. So.
Now, and I know this sounds a little bit like a silly question in some ways, but I'm sure there's a cost difference in buying prepackaged whatever it is and having to cook from really pure ingredients and really carefully chosen ingredients. Have you noticed any difference?
Yeah, there's a huge difference, but the biggest cost is in doctor's bills.
Right,
and
medicines.
And
That's
medicines,
a good point.
right. There is a big difference, especially if you buy organic, which I recommend everyone does, because if you're buying conventional products, you're essentially buying poisons. And there's a website you can go to called EWG.org. It's Environmental Working Group, and they have the Dirty Dozen list, and they'll tell you on that website which fruits and vegetables has the most pesticide residue on it. And they'll also tell you the cleanest ones, the ones that you can actually buy conventionally without harming yourself too much.
And I've heard that if it's got a thick peel, you're safer than if it doesn't.
I don't know that that's true. Potatoes are one of the highest.
I was thinking about bananas and things like that, so.
I'm not sure where bananas fit in there, and I'm certainly not an expert on the subject, but
curious,
but you can find out from Environmental Working Group just what the most toxic and the least toxic vegetables and fruits are that you can buy.
Besides continuing to create fabulous recipes and enjoying those, what's the future for you?
Well, I'm continuing to write cookbooks, and I just do this because I'm creating dishes, and why keep them to myself? I'm doing an Ethiopian cookbook right now. There are, as I mentioned before, ethnic groups are fantastic for foods, for vegan foods. Ethiopia has 170 days a year, fasting days, in which no animal products are allowed.
So that's their version of fasting, is just no animal products.
No animal products are allowed. And and because it's encouraged by the church, people can go as long as 300 days a year without eating any animal products.
There's nothing wrong with that for their body.
Right. And so Ethiopian food is a natural fit for a vegan because they already have worked out these spices. A lot of these cultures have spices that are similar to each other, like Indian and Ethiopian spices are very similar, but they use them differently. And it's because they were on the same spice trading routes. But they use them completely differently. And so these are complementary cuisines, and I actually sometimes will use Indian foods in my Ethiopian dish because it fits very well.
Interesting.
And but I've interviewed lots of Ethiopian chefs, and I've had them invite me into their kitchen and to give me cooking lessons.
That's
They've done,
great.
yeah, it's great. And so I'm doing an Ethiopian cookbook. I'm also doing an Asian.
I was going to say, what's after this one?
Yeah, I'm doing Ethiopian, Asian, Indian.
And these are separate little books.
Yeah,
that you're doing.
they're separate small books. I think they're just going to be e-books.
Okay.
And I'm going very detailed step by step in how to do it.
So for the total novice, they could actually learn how to do it.
That's right. They could do it, and that's true of Time for Change as well. I assume that the person reading the book has zero experience in the kitchen.
That's a good thing to know because, for those people who aren't secure about this or don't feel like they're capable of cooking in this way, or like, I can tell you've cooked a lot and played a lot with it, and so there's a comfortableness about your approach toward cooking that maybe isn't there for everyone. So
every time you go into the kitchen, you should consider that you're performing a scientific experiment. Sometimes they'll work out, and sometimes not so much.
I can remember a few of those experiments over the past.
But you're performing an experiment, and sometimes they'll work out, and sometimes they won't, and don't worry about it.
And sometimes you do it what you thought was the same way you did it the last time, and it still doesn't do the same thing.
And the marvelous thing is that you'll have happy accidents. Well, I do this all the time when I eat in a restaurant and say, "Oh my God, this was so good! I have to go home and make it myself." And I am not able to recreate it, but I come up with a recipe that's so good I want to write it down right away and add it to my repertoire because you just have these marvelous happy accidents.
So you play in the kitchen, and then if it's good, you write it down?
Right. Well, I write it down anyway.
Okay.
My husband has actually taught me to do that because I'll say, "No, how did I do that?" And so I write it down anyway. And if it turns out that it doesn't work out, then maybe I'll toss that one and say, "Okay, let's start
you
over."
have a file of "Don't do these."
Yeah. Or this didn't work. Don't do this again. So yeah, but there are really fantastic dishes. I make a clam chowder. It's not a clam chowder. I call it New England clamless chowder.
Clamless.
Yeah, clamless chowder. And it has the creaminess and the mouthfeel of eating clams. I use shiitake mushrooms. And they look like clams. They have the chewiness of clams, but of course they don't taste like clams. But the potato, the rich, creamy potato stew is very much like clam chowder. And I use cashews to make a cashew cream, which thickens just like cream when you're cooking with it, and it's marvelous.
So if you're a lover of clam chowder, you might very much like this.
You would like this. And I took introduced a friend to it the other day, and he thought he said, "How did you make it taste fishy?" And it was in his mind. It wasn't fishy at all. But you can, if you really want it fishy, you can add some seaweed in it and give it that fishy flavor. But I really don't want to try to reproduce foods that I've given up. I'd rather just learn to like new foods, and there's certainly plenty of delicious flavors out there.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've noticed with a lot of diet changes people make is there are substitutes for something, as if you're trying to replicate the original taste.
Right.
And
there's a lot of faux meats out there if you want it. To me, I call them mystery meats. It's
we
fine.
called it that in grade school too.
It's fine if that's what you need to do for making a transition, but I think it should be a short-term goal instead of a long-term because they're really not whole foods. They're very processed.
Well, it sounds like this truly is a lifestyle change.
It is a lifestyle change, and it's a life-saving lifestyle change.
And I think it's fascinating that you're taking your artistic personality and the creativity that's in you, and you're turning it into something in a totally new direction, but yet it's still creative.
It is creative, and it's fun, and never be afraid to ask questions. One thing that we all have in common is that we eat. And people love to talk about food. They love to share recipes. When I go to a grocery store, I'm always looking in other people's baskets, and I say, "Hey, what are you going to do with that?" And they tell me, and they love sharing tips. I learned how to make tabbouleh, baba ganoush, and hummus, 3 Mediterranean dishes. I learned to make that from Saddam Hussein's personal chef.
Really?
I did. I was in a life
She's been traveling.
Life is stranger than fiction. I had gone to a neighboring city from where I live, and I was buying a chair I'd seen advertised, and the man who was selling me the chair was telling me about this delightful Mediterranean restaurant around the corner, which I had been to many times. I love that that restaurant. And he told me the chef had been Saddam Hussein's personal chef. I didn't believe that for an instant, but you better believe when I was in there, I asked her, because it's a family-run restaurant, and I asked his daughter-in-law if it was true, and she says, "Oh yes, for 20 years."
Oh my goodness!
And so the family came over and started telling me about it. They showed me his ID that he used to get into Saddam's palace.
Wow!
And he's a very lovely man. He was a Christian who fled Iraq to escape religious persecution, and he opened this lovely little Mediterranean restaurant, and it's one of my favorite places to eat. And he's very generous. He shared with me a lot of his recipes.
You told me today that you discovered a new vegetable. So now, next thing I'm expecting to see it on the blog
Yeah, I've never tried this recipe, this vegetable before. I was at Earth Fair, and they have this green cauliflower-looking thing, only it's pointed. It's a triangular shape, and it really looks kind of like a seashell with all these little cones, or a piece of coral reef or something, with all these little cones coming out from around it, and it's kind of a lime green color. And I just thought it was interesting. Of course, I had to buy it.
It's called what?
I think it's called Roman cauliflower.
Interesting. So next, you're going to tell us all what to do with that, right?
I'll figure something out. But it's wonderful working with different cuisines, different spice blends. When you get comfortable with it, you can try adding more of these things that you've never heard of. And the more you get comfortable with things, the more you can add.
Right.
And so it's really not daunting. You can start out with simple things. Like when I first started, I started with things like red beans and rice, and then I'd throw some vegetables in with it, or I would make pastas with vegetable sauces instead of meat sauces, and a lot of veggie burgers or veggie sandwiches.
Right.
I had a builder come over to my house, a contractor, because he was giving me an estimate on a sunroom that I wanted to make out of my little porch, and I gave him the job, and he and his son-in-law came over for 2 weeks, and so for 2 weeks I fed them vegan food. Now these are meat and potatoes guys, and I knew that Tom was Italian, so the first thing I made for him was a calzone, and I stuffed it with a vegan ricotta cheese that I had made, and I put pineapple and mushrooms and Kalamata olives and artichoke hearts and roasted rail, just stuffed it full of wonderful vegetables. And he and his son-in-law just went crazy over this. I'm trying to think of his son-in-law's name. It just jumped out of my head. But they just absolutely went nuts over it. And so every day from then on, they came into my kitchen first thing and said, "What's on the menu today?" And I fed them Indian dishes, and there was one particular, Harrison was his son-in-law's name, and he's a 22-year-old kid. And I made him a sandwich one day, and it was a vegan sandwich, and it had all of these soft vegetables juxtaposed with a crunchy fermented vegetables that I'd made. It was sweet and soft vegetables like beets and sliced sweet potato and avocado, and then I put these crunchy sour vegetables on top.
Interesting.
It sounds bizarre, but it's really delicious. Those flavors meld, and it's wonderful, and I put it on a homemade whole grain bun. And I watched Harrison eat that sandwich, and he shut his eyes, and he just savored every bite of it. And he told me, when I first saw that sandwich, I thought what it really needs is a huge chunk of meat and some cheese. He said, but when I tried it, I realized that would have just ruined it. It was so flavorful, he didn't miss the meat at all.
How about that?
And Tom said, I've always loved vegetables, but I never dreamed that vegetables could taste like this. And that's what we hear all the time.
That's interesting.
When, I don't just tell people I don't cook meat, I just don't cook meat.
Well, we have artist demonstrations at the Blue Ridge Art Space, and you and I've talked about you coming and doing a demonstration.
I'm going to do my clam chowder recipe.
And what month did we pick?
I think it's March.
Oh boy.
I think so.
Soon.
I think it's March. I think so. It's on my calendar, but I can't
That would be March the 14th. And so I'm
not exactly sure, but I think it is
I
March.
think you may be right.
Yeah.
And so, boy, it's great that we know our calendars that well. But anyway, if you'd like to come and meet Danielle and learn more about this, maybe get a copy of her book, and also to try out something that she's talking about, that would be a great opportunity. That would be our second Saturday that we do every single month. And I encourage you to come and check it out. We're going to have some really interesting things going on that night in other ways as well. Also, while I'm mentioning events of the Arts Council, let me caution you that due to all the recent snows, we've had a lot of schedule changes in workshops and classes. So the ones that will be happening after this date, don't worry about that's on schedule unless we get another snow. But the ones that should have happened before, you may not have missed because we may have had to postpone them. I know of one we've postponed, this will be the third time. So, you know, you don't know what the weather may have done to the schedule. So check our website, watauga-arts.org, and you can find information about the current things going on, and you can also find a link over to Danielle and learn about all the different things that she's doing. And Danielle, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
I'm looking forward to this sampling opportunity. All right, and thank you for joining us. Again, check our website, watauga-arts.org, for information about this and a lot more.
Watauga Arts Council with your host, Cherry Johnson, serving arts in Watauga County for more than 30 years.